Hey guys, it's Cliff again. So today I thought I'd make a video in regards to how to price a detailed service. Over the last few weeks I've had a few guys reach out in regards to this subject, so I thought I'd make a quick, easy, to the point video on how to do so with Excel. Now there's a lot of factors that are going to come into play, but I thought I'd give you at least the starting point and then you can adjust based on your circumstances. But pricing a detailed service is very, very important. It's actually one of the most important things when going from detailing as a hobby to detailing as a business, and a profitable business at that. So if you would, let's get started. Alright guys, so let's get started. So you'll see here I have a spreadsheet already created to save us time. And today we're going to be primarily focusing on mobile pricing. Now I did add a few things in here for someone that has a fixed location. So either way, you should be able to get a good concrete foundation for your pricing. But primarily this is going to be focusing on mobile pricing, since I know majority of us out there are mobile detailers, and a lot of the individuals that reached out to me on how to price a detail are mobile detailers. Okay, so you'll see the mobile pricing. The next thing we're going to have to the right hand side is detail service cost, expenses, total expenses per detail, total profit, hourly profit, and your personal expenses. Now all these are going to work together in order for us to figure out how to price a detail service. And there's a few other things, but we'll touch on that here in a moment. So before we even get to figuring out what our detail service costs need to be, right, based on our expenses and a few other things, we first need to figure out is what is our personal expenses? How much are we spending every month, right? So you're going to see here you have your personal expenses, and it's broken down to rent or mortgage, bills, food, entertainment, personal needs, etc. Now there may be other things that go into play for your personal expenses, but this is just kind of more or less a generic way of breaking them down. So first of all, we're going to start with our rent or mortgage. So let's say our rent or mortgage is $1,400 a month. I almost put 400. All of us could wish, right? 1,400. And then let's say our bills, which usually consist of like a car note or a credit card balance, let's say that's, $475 a month, right? So you have maybe one car note, a credit card balance, or a student loan that you're paying, whatever. Next thing is like food, entertainment, personal needs, utilities, Hulu, the whole 9 yards. That'll be wrapped into that. So let's say that's $750 a month. I know this is going to be probably, either very similar or way different than your own. But like I said, you can always plug in your own numbers to figure out what your total expenses are. So for this example, you're going to notice these total expenses, right, is going to come out to $2,625, and all that is $1,400 plus $475 plus $750, which equates to $2,625. So once we figure out our total expenses, we need to figure out our break-even hourly rate. And what a break-even hourly rate is, how much we need to make per hour on a 40-hour work week in order for us just to pay our bills. So in other words, paycheck to paycheck type of situation. So how we're going to come up with that is we're going to take 40 hours a week times 4, because there's 4 weeks in a month, and that's going to come up to 160. And then what we're going to do to find our break-even hourly rate is we're going to take, our total expenses, which is $2,625, and we're going to divide it out by 160. So that's going to come out to $16.41 an hour. So we need to make that an hour for 40 hours for 4 weeks in order for us just to break even to pay our bills. Okay? So once we have that break-even hourly rate, now we have a good foundation to figure out later on what to charge in order for us just to pay our bills at home, but also to pay everything at work and to bring home additional cash flow for either the business and for us personally. So once we have our personal expenses figured out, now we're going to go over to the expense column, okay? And you're going to see the first thing I have listed here is an insurance cost. So every day you wake up as a business owner, you're going to already accrue some sort of cost. And insurance is the first thing. So for this example, we're assuming, right, you have either a liability insurance or you have liability plus garage keepers. And if you don't have insurance, obviously this expense won't be here, but I would highly recommend, if you're trying to go from a hobby to a business, that you really need to focus on getting an insurance policy as soon as possible, because not only is it going to protect you on a situation that may or may not happen, but also it is going to help your business grow in the future, because there will be clients that go and reach out to you and ask you, do you have an insurance policy? And if you say, no, I don't, I'm self-insured, you may lose a lot of these clients. And it may just take one client, which could have ended up being 20 additional clients, or repeat business over and over again, especially if it's a higher end type of client. And that would have equated to way more than what that dollar amount was for that 1 year to have both of those insurance policies. So for this example, I'm going to put our insurance costs right at $1,600 a year, and that's for garage keepers and liability, which is what I typically would recommend for any of you. Now, policies aren't going to range all over the place, right? Because you can change policies and manipulate them, and New York is going to be different than Kansas City, Kansas, right? Because liability and risk and all that is going to change the total amount of the policy. But in general, I would say on average, most of us are probably paying about $1,600 a year on insurance. Okay, so for this an example, we're just going to say $1,600, right, for a $1 million policy with garage keepers. So now that we know that we're paying, let's say, $1,600 a year, now we need to figure out every detail, how much of that is insurance, right? So for this an example, I figured out probably the best way of doing this is to just say we have 5 details a week, 4 weeks in a month, right? And if we times that by 12, would come out to about 240 details a year. Now, it could be more, it could be a whole lot less, right? There's a lot of factors, but just to keep things simple, let's just say you have 240 details. So now what we can do is we can actually take this 1,600, we can divide it by 240, and that's going to come out to 6.66, right, which is a scary number. So we're going to round this to 6.67, okay? But it comes out to about $6.67 is what you're going to pay before you even touch that client's car that day, right? That's how much you're out before anything. So after the insurance cost is taken into consideration, then there's going to be gas, right? Because you have to drive to their house. You have to drive to their place of business in order for you to perform your job. So how I came up with gas on average for majority of your clients is to take your radius, whatever that may be, 20 miles, 10 miles, 50 miles, right? And you just want to see how much it's going to cost in gas to go from home to that point, okay? So for an example, let's say you have a 30-mile radius. So you have a 30-mile radius, and once you have that, you need to look up to see what you're getting on average for miles per gallon for your vehicle. So let's say you're getting 25 miles to the gallon on your van. So now we know two things. We know how many miles we're going to be traveling, right? And this is going to be, once again, more of a maximum, right? 30 miles is probably going to be the maximum we're going to travel. We could travel further, right? But we're looking for an average, right? So average 30 miles. And then we have 25 miles to the gallon. So now we could do 30 divided by 25, and that'll equal, right, how many gallons we're going to be spending on average for that detail. So this is 1.2 for this an example. And remember, this isn't a perfect science. I'm just throwing numbers out there. It may only be 5 or 10 miles as your average, okay? I'm just throwing it out there for an example. So now we have 1.2 gallons, right? And let's say gas is $2.50, right? So all we have to do is do the 1.2 times whatever the cost of gas is on average in your area, and it comes out to a number. In this case, it came out to $3. So we can put $3 for gas, right? So this gives you an idea of how much you're spending on gas to get to the client's house. And for this example, all we're going to focus is all the costs associated for you going to the client's house, right, and doing the detail. We're not going to focus anything on the way back. And that's just because a lot of, once again, depending based on your area and state and whatnot, but a lot of things on the tax side typically wants to take in consideration only you going to the job site but not coming back. So the next thing we have is tolls, right? Because that's going to be an additional cost. So, excuse me. So how I came up with toll costs is basically, and first of all, if you don't have tolls in your area, then I mean, you can obviously keep this zero, but someone like myself who's here in Dallas, where tolls are everywhere, that is a very important expense, and that does add up very quickly because tolls are very expensive here. But in order to figure out that, you're going to use the same radius deal. So let's say it's 30 miles, and how many tolls between home and roughly within the 30 miles that you travel, how many tolls are you hitting and how much are those tolls? Now, if you don't know what the cost of these tolls are, you can definitely check out your local toll website, and it'll tell you what tolls and what the costs are, and you can even type in 2 addresses and it'll tell you how much it costs for you to get to point A to point B. So for an example, let's say it costs you $4 in tolls, right, to get where you need to go, right? So you get on, there's 75 cents, there's another one for $1.75, and then another one for 85, blah blah blah. It adds up to, let's say, around $4, right? So you have $4 in tolls. So we've already actually basically took all these into consideration before even getting to our client's house, right? So once we get there, we're going to have chemical and equipment costs, right? So how much money we're going to spend on chemicals for the detailed job, or how much of the chemicals we're going to use for the detailed job, okay? Now, if you don't have a detailed inventory system, this may be a little bit more difficult to figure out how much you're actually spending per detail for the chemical. But to give you an example, to come up with the chemical cost per detail, you need to know for whatever service A may be, what chemicals you use, how much that chemical, and based on the cost that you purchase that chemical and how many times you can use that chemical before it's up in regards to details, that'll help you figure out what your total cost is going to be for chemicals. So let's just put a number in here for now, but let's say, for chemicals, it costs us $6 for whatever service A is, right? Let's say it's just an exterior detail, but you do some sort of spray sealing. So your costs are going to be a little bit higher. So let's say it's $6, but it could be $30. It could be $100, right? If you have ceramic coating, whatever. But the point is, you're going to type whatever that cost is for that chemical or chemicals that you use for that detail. Now, once we have that, we need to focus on equipment. And once again, this is where having a really detailed inventory system and depreciation system created, so you could figure out exactly how much it costs you per year in equipment in order for you to operate your business, because then you can figure out, okay, how many details do I have per year? Okay, now I figured out how much per detail I'm spending on wear and tear on my equipment or on my products, etc., etc. Because that's a very important number, because that number is going to fluctuate all over the place based on the size of the business and what you're doing exactly. So let's say, for an example, that is $3.75, which is basically, I think that equates to, I don't know, around $900 a year, right, that you would have towards spending on equipment and wear and tear type of stuff. I'm actually going to check that real quick to see if my math is really that good. Oh wow, it is 900. Okay, awesome. So yeah, So it'd be about $900, which is more than enough to buy a polisher, pressure washer, whatever. So, this equipment cost, like I said, is going to vary, but this should give you an idea. Now, this next column you're going to see is rent. And obviously, as a mobile detailer, for the most part, we're not going to have rent. But the reason I put this here is if you have a fixed location, right, you're going to have insurance costs. You may not have gas and tolls in here, but you will have chemicals and equipment. But your rent is something you can focus on. So all your utilities, the cost of renting that facility, you can add that up. And how you find out what it costs per detail is to figure out what the monthly total is of all your expenses for the building or for rent, right? Utilities and everything. And then how many details per month you're going to have. And you divide it out. So let's say it comes out to be $60 a detail is what that rent equates to, then you're going to put $60 here, okay? So that just means you're going to have a lot higher overhead. So that means you're going to have to perform a lot more work, right, in order for you to be profitable. And you may have to charge slightly more or slightly less, but just have increased volume to kind of offset things. So that's why when owning a detail shop or studio, it can be very difficult because there's a lot of factors that come into play. But that's for another video. But I did put that there, so if you do have a fixed location, regardless of size, this gives you kind of an idea of where you need to put this at. So you'll see here next, total expenses per detail now comes out to $23.42. Okay, so that's how much we're spending before we get finished with the detail and before we even get paid by the client. Okay, so now that we have this number, you're going to see over here it says total profits at $23.42 negative. So right now we lost money. Okay, and then next to that is hourly profit. And how we come up with hourly profit is total profit divided by the allotted time for the detail service. So since this number right here is kind of mishmashed, we need to now focus on detail service costs. And how to come up with that, we're first going to figure out, okay, whatever service A is, how long is it going to take me realistically to finish? So let's say it's a full exterior detail, right? Everything under the sun besides paint correction and ceramic coating, but you're doing clay barring, iron X, you're polishing the exhaust tips, you're cleaning inside and outside of the wheels, door jambs, everything, right? So it takes you 2.5 hours to finish that job. Now that we have that, we now know that our hourly rate is negative $9.37. So now we have something compiling over here. The next thing that we need to figure out is what we need to charge in order to get this number positive. So I'm going to put here initially $10, right? And now we have the total cost of the detail pop up. And now you're going to see here that we're positive 63 cents an hour, which is some big money, right? Not really. So now that we know that we are now positive, right? Now we can double this hourly rate and see that now we're at $10 an hour after expenses. But remember, we're trying to get break even with our personal expenses. So now we need to rate this up to $30. Now, hitting $30 an hour rate for this particular service, that's $75 total for the customer. Now we're actually bringing home additional cash flow for the business and for us as an individual. Now, you're going to see here additional charge slot, and that's for just rare circumstances that if they're out of a normal range, you may charge the customer an extra $15 or $20 or whatever you feel you guys agree on is fair. And there's other circumstances, so I put that there just in case someone wanted to add some sort of additional charge to equate to the total of the $75. So if you had an extra charge of $15 because of, additional whatever, then you can put that there, and that gives you an idea of what the customer's total cost is, okay? Now, this isn't a perfect science. I mean, obviously you guys at home may have different things in association with the cost of expenses and, the amount of time it takes you and your personal expenses, but this will give you a great idea of how to figure out the cost of what you need to charge for a service in order for the business to be profitable, in order for you to pay your bills, in order for you to grow as an individual and as a business owner. Now, with that said, there's a few other things to take into consideration. Service A compared to service B, you could do this equation in order to come up with some sort of number, but you also have to take into consideration on the amount of difficulty or amount of skill that it takes in order to complete that detail. So what I'm talking about is service A, we were saying, was just like an exterior detail, right? Well, if I was to do service B, right, which is a paint correction, we may take 7 hours on that, right? And I guess we could do $30 an hour. And then we can drop this down, right? So now we're charging $210. And let's just say for the purposes of this example, we keep everything the same, right? So you'll see here that if we keep everything the same, we are profiting more per hour, right, than we were before. But it still doesn't take in consideration the skill level needed for that service. So what I'm trying to say is, you could come up with a certain hourly rate. Let's say it's $30. That works perfectly for you and your family and everything that's going on. But if it takes more skill, right, to do whatever service there is, then you should increase the hourly rate of that, okay? Which will, increase this number a little bit more dramatically compared to not. But you also have to make sure you value your time. And remember, for paint correction, I mean, obviously your equipment costs will be a little bit higher, your chemical costs will be a little bit higher. So that's not taken consideration. So these numbers aren't exactly what they should be. But what I'm trying to say is, you use this to figure out what the cost should be at a minimum. And on average, it's going to work for almost every service. But if you have, like, a paint correction, or you're doing some sort of ceramic coating, a specialty thing that not everyone can do, right? And you may be one of the best people in the area that can do paint correction, or they can do ceramic coating, whatever it may be, then you may want to increase this hourly rate, because, why do that detail if you could just do a simpler job and get paid the same per hour, if that makes any sense. Yes, you're guaranteed more hours with this, but you could also probably close a lot more sales at $75 a piece compared to $245, right? So you also have to value your time and the amount of, expertise for that particular service. Now, the last thing to take into consideration is your competition per se, or your area. So every area is going to have some sort of going rate for a mobile detailer. And I know there might be someone that's, really high and someone's like extremely low, but you want to find an average, because a lot of, like, the people that are just going based on dollar and dollar only, they'll be out of business within 6 months, a year. They'll figure out that they're not making any money and they're losing money, and they'll be gone. And plus, those people cannot compare to you, because there's no way, if they're charging, on average $15 an hour for their services, that they have, insurance for their business, that they're doing the right things, because there's no way they could do an exterior detail in 30 minutes and do it properly, right? So there's a lot of things that go into consideration on that. So once again, once you come up with these numbers, you need to go and look to see what, a respectable detailer in your area is charging. And I'm not saying to copy the exact rate that they're charging, right? But what I'm saying is, get an idea. If they're charging $60 an hour, roughly, you can tell, for a particular service. Well, if you have yourself calculated here at $28, right, and you feel like you're confident that your skill level is the same, well, maybe you should increase that amount. And the last thing I'm going to say on regards to pricing too is, if you're beginning, if you're just starting out, you don't want to price yourself too low. If you price yourself too low from the beginning, it's very difficult to get yourself out of that. So I understand at first, you're desperate for customers, you're desperate to make money and to expand, and you may want to reduce, the cost of your services or discount them in order to get these clients, in order to get some sort of dollars in. But you may trap yourself later on because you're going to have people that think that they can get your type of service, right, which is amazing, at this price. And then later on, when you try to increase it to where it should have been originally, which is, 2 times the cost, or, 3 times the cost, whatever it is, right? Say that you really price yourself low, you're going to probably lose these clients. And it's better for you to start more in the range of the middle or a little bit on the higher side and go from there than it is to start extremely low and try to work your way out of that. Okay, so I hope this really helps a lot of you guys figure out how to price your details and what things to take in consideration. Like I said, this example is not with employees. This example may not have every single thing that's going on with you and your particular business, but this should give you an idea to become profitable and to stay profitable and to grow as a business. So if you guys have any questions, or if you guys need anything else, please comment below. I'm going to try to do a lot of these videos going forward, especially if this gets a lot of great feedback and a lot of people are really enjoying this content. I'll try to go as in depth on a business side to help you guys get everything situated, since pricing your detail services is actually one of the most important things when going full-time with your detail business, because this is going to be everything on the standpoint of everything. I mean, pricing is key. Not only is your work very important, but your pricing for that work, I think, is even more important, because this is going to be the foundation of your success or failure. So but yeah, so with that said, I hope you guys have a great day. And until the next video, take care.